Hi everyone, I'm Shelly and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I'm back with another video and today's topic is White Throne Judgment Fulfilled. As a believer in fulfilled eschatology, which I think is more aptly called biblical eschatology, I believe that all prophecies of the Bible were fulfilled by AD 70. And I've now made hundreds of videos on this topic. Now, one of the most common objections I will get is the question of the white throne judgment of Revelation 20. So let's read what that says before we get started on anything else. Revelation 20, verses 11 to 13. Then I saw a great white throne and him who was seated on it. From his presence, earth and sky fled away, and no place was found for them. And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and books were opened. Then another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged by what was written in the books according to what they had done. And the sea gave up the dead who were in it. Death and Hades gave up the dead who were in them, and they were judged, each one of them according to what they had done. So, someone who is looking at this passage in a very literal way would say, see, none of that obviously has happened. The earth and sky has not fled away, and there has never been a point in history where God came down on his throne and all the dead, great and small, were standing before him and being judged. Obviously, the white throne judgment has not happened. How can you possibly believe that? Well, as someone who has been studying this now for about a year and a half, so by no means am I an expert, but when I say studying, I don't just mean here and there. I mean every day. This is a new obsession for me almost, is because I am so wanting to understand what the Bible really says that I spend hours every single day on top of homeschooling my children and taking care of the house. I spend hours a day studying this. And in my studies, my paradigm has been completely blown away, completely shifted, because I once came to I once had this approach to prophecy as also being very literal. Like, I was going through my old Bible notes for Revelation 20, and I'm seeing that I'm talking about chimeras and literal creatures that are like locusts with the heads of horses. And I just, yeah, I came from that very literal reading. But the problem is that that is not how the book of Revelation was written. It was not written in a manner that was intended to be interpreted literally. The book of Revelation is, if not the most, it is one of the most symbolic books of the Bible. And most people acknowledge that. I know a lot of premillennialists will not, but most people, even postmillennialists and amillennialists, will at least accept that there is a lot of symbology in the book of Revelation. And that is how we need to look at this passage. Then I saw a great white throne and him who was seated on it. And I just want to point out that even in the very beginning in Revelation 1, it tells us that these things were signified to John. And signified means given in signs. So what he is conveying here, these are visions that he was seeing. These were not the actual material events that were happening. The ancient Hebrews, that's not what this video is about, so I'm not going to get into it too much, but they communicated very, very differently than we do. And we need to understand that they also communicated in different ways. One of the ways, actually the main way that they conveyed prophecy, was through apocalyptic language, which is the language that sounds like world ending, earth shattering. But if you go back to the Old Testament and you actually read this world ending, earth shattering prophecies that were about the judgments of other nations, well, we know that the earth obviously the world didn't end in the Old Testament times, even though that language is used for those prophecies. It was a very common way for them to convey things. But anyway, So it says here that earth and sky fled away. So you might be thinking, okay, well, why do we still have earth and a sky? Well, I'm not going to get too much into this today because I've already done videos on heaven and earth, and that is actually referring to the dissolution of the old covenant and the ushering in of the new covenant. So earth and sky fleeing away, that was referring to the old covenant. No place was found for them. Why? Because the new covenant came in upon the destruction of the temple. In the next portion of this passage, it starts talking about how the dead are all standing there and they're going to be judged by whoever had their names written in the book of life and who did not. And many Christians have this idea of all the people who have ever lived and all the people who were alive at that time when Jesus came back for this white throne judgment, they would all be standing there at the same time and they would all be getting judged, and this was going to be the once and for all time. This was going to be the final judgment. The problem is that the word final is not to be found anywhere that I am aware of in the scriptures, other than maybe in subheadings that were added by the translators. It's not actually in the scriptures. It never says final. So that is very interesting. So we're always thinking of this as being a once and done thing. That is actually an idea that was inserted by man, that this white throne judgment was going to be this physical thing of everyone at the same time. And it was just going to happen once, and then bam, that was it. And then the earth is no more, and there's going to be, paradise, and all of these notions are better found in books like Left Behind than if you actually understand what the Bible says, which is what I'm trying to do. I wanted this whole paradise on earth thing, and I looked forward to all the, like in the Left Behind series, people ran all the way to Jerusalem and they didn't even get tired, and then they all stood there and everyone stood there and they didn't get judged. I mean, they did get judged. They stood there for the white throne judgment, and even though all the people who had ever lived were there, it didn't even take long for you to get judged. You didn't even know that any time had passed. Like, this is all fiction, and unfortunately, so many people have placed their eschatology on it. So, what is my view then on the white throne judgment? In order to understand the white throne judgment, what you need to understand is that there was no judgment before, and judgment on nations, yes, I'm talking about judgment of people. There was no judgment after death before the resurrection, which I believe happened in AD 70. And I believe that the resurrection happened at the destruction of the temple, just as Daniel 12:7 said would happen. And I believe that it was a corporate resurrection, meaning that the old covenant was dissolved and the new covenant was ushered in, being brought from death to life. So what I have here is a verse, 2 Corinthians 3:7, that says, "Now if the ministry of death, carved in letters on stone, came with such glory that the Israelites could not gaze at Moses' face because of its glory, which was being brought to an end, will not the ministry of the Spirit be even more glorious?" This is talking about how the old covenant was coming to an end. And what did Paul call the old covenant? He called it the ministry of death. Yet, here in John 11:26, Jesus said, "And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die." Do you believe this? Actually, let me back up. Verse 25 says, Jesus said to her, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me will live, even though he dies. And everyone who lives and believes in me will never die." Do you believe this? The resurrection was a corporate resurrection. It was the old covenant being put away. It was the old covenant fleeing. The ministry of death was fleeing, and the new covenant of life was brought in. Death to life is the resurrection. So going back to this image now, I know I'm jumping around a bit, but that's okay. I'm sure you'll figure it out. Um, Going back to this image now, before the resurrection, before the corporate resurrection, I believe it was in AD 70 when the Old Testament was dissolved and the New Testament was ushered in. That was the resurrection. Before that time, there was no judgment, and people, when they died, they went to a place called Sheol. And this, it says history of hell, but to be honest, the word Sheol really doesn't have anything in common with like our conception of what hell is, like flames and burning sulfur, and that's really not what Sheol was thought of in the Old Testament. So here I have Strong's Concordance, Sheol. It was Hades, or the world of the dead, as if a subterranean retreat, including its accessories and inmates. Now, there are many different views on Sheol, which is again where people, both the wicked and the righteous, went to Sheol before the resurrection. That's where they stayed. Now, some people believe that Sheol just meant the grave, and they slept there unconsciously until the resurrection. And there are others who believe that Sheol was a place where spirits would still roam around. And I'm not really sure what I think about that, but here it says, Sheol is the unseen realm of the dead, the destination of both righteous and wicked until the final resurrection. It is described as below the earth, always receiving and never satisfied. So you see the word final resurrection. So you're probably thinking, well, what does that mean then? Final resurrection. It means that physical bodies are going to come out of the ground. No, I believe this resurrection, it was spiritual. It was going from the old covenant, which was very physical, to the new covenant, which is a covenant of the spirit. And you're probably thinking, why does it say final resurrection then? Final resurrection because the new covenant is eternal. The old covenant came to an end, but scriptures tell us that the new covenant would last forever. Jesus said, my word will never pass away. What is Jesus's word? His word is the new covenant. Some verses on Sheol, Psalm 18:5. The cords of Sheol entangled me. The snares of death confronted me. Psalm 6:5. For in death there is no remembrance of you. In Sheol, who will give you praise? Isaiah 38:18. For Sheol does not thank you. Death does not praise you. Those who go down to the pit do not hope for your faithfulness. So from what I've been studying and the passages that I've been putting together, and it really does take a lot of shedding your preconceived notions, things that you were taught by church, especially the literal things that were not meant to be taken literally. I believe that the white throne judgment was not referring to one specific physical time period when everyone who was dead and alive was going to be judged at the same time. I believe that the white throne judgment was the commencement of the judging that we would all receive upon our passage from this physical realm to the spiritual realm at the time of our physical death. People are going to say, but I thought death was defeated. Yes, spiritual death was defeated. It was never about physical death. We are still going to physically die from this world. And at that time, since 70 AD, when the new heaven and earth was ushered in, this white throne judgment, that was when it began. Not before then. They all went to Sheol. They were not judged upon their deaths then. It was after 70 AD that this judgment began. And so I don't believe that it was this one, it was or is going to be this one event that all happens at one time. I believe it's something that happens to every person when they die physically from 70 AD on. And for all of those who were already in the grave before 70 AD, yes, I believe that their spirits rose and they were judged at that time, at 70 AD. Now, you might be saying, well, do you have any verses to back you up? I think I do. 2 Corinthians 5:10. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each one may receive what is due for what he has done in the body, whether good or evil. Now, I want you to take notice. Again, I could be wrong. There are no passages that say that everyone in the world is going to be judged at exactly the same time. You might be saying, but Revelation 20, didn't you just read that? That was a vision. And that was giving John the picture of this judgment that was now going to be commenced in AD 70 at the destruction of the temple. And then everyone who had ever lived or from that point on was going to be judged then after their death, which had never happened before AD 70. And so this tells us here that we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, so that each one may receive what is due for what he has done in the body. Hebrews 9:27. And just as it is appointed for man to die once, and after that comes judgment. Really take a long, hard look at that. And just as it is appointed for man to die once, and after that comes judgment. It says that man is appointed to die once, and then after death comes judgment. It does not say that some people will not die and that they will be judged beforehand. It says that man is appointed to die once, and then after that comes judgment. So in my opinion, that would kind of negate the idea that this white throne judgment is going to be ushered in when some people are still alive and it's all going to happen at once. It says here that it happens after you die. That is when you are judged. And I believe that's what the white throne judgment is. I think that we have again inserted a lot of mythology onto what the white throne judgment actually is. And it would make for a great movie. It did make for a great fiction series, even though it's troubling that people have now made Left Behind their eschatology. I did for quite a bit of time because unfortunately I read it when I was a pretty new Christian. But if we actually look at what the Bible says, I think it's pretty easy to see that we have used eisegesis. We've inserted our own ideas of what we think the white throne judgment is going to be like or what it was like. And we have missed what the text actually says. For example, the idea that it's a final judgment. It never says final judgment in the actual scriptures. It only says it in the subheadings added by the translators. I don't think that it was a final judgment. I think it was the beginning of the judgment. It began at that time, at the resurrection in AD 70. And from that point forward, everyone who died would be judged upon their death. And those who had died before 70 AD, their spirits were resurrected out of Sheol. And that was when they were judged and they were given the opportunity to pass on according to, what they had believed, even as Old Testament saints. So anyway, I hope that this has made sense to you. If you have any questions, let me know. And if you do have any verses where scripture specifically says final judgment, let me know because I want to know if I'm wrong, if there are any scriptures that actually say final judgment, and if there are any scriptures that are written, narrative style, not in visions or not in apocalyptic language, but scriptures that say that it's all a once and done thing and it all happens at the same time. Because to me, I don't believe that that's what it was saying at all. Revelation 20, it was a vision. And we need to understand it like a vision and not like a literal narrative. Anyway, that's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one down below. And if you like my work and would like to become a channel member, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well. Or you can just click on it right on my channel page. And I hope you have a great day.